of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt the Bud Knight, joined by my good buddy, great friend, loyal bannerman, Jimmy of House Nutter, aka the Fantasy Network.
How's it going, man? I'm happy to be here. I'm fired up.
This is great. I'm glad you're fired up, man. This was crazy. I saw this today. What we're going to talk about today is we got a update from George R. Martin, and I messaged Jimmy. I was like 6 a.m. my time, and I was like, "Whoa, did you guys see this update? Jimmy, would you be down to chat about this later?" And he said, "Yeah." So here we go. This is going to be sweet. This is actually, of all of the updates we've gotten, this one's kind of interesting. So he's talking about a lot here. This is a really big post. It is called good stuff, bad stuff, strange stuff. And so he's talking about, some of the stuff that's going on in the world. Obviously there was that big shooting. I think he's talking, and he had another post sort of about that as well. And he's talking about like wild cards and some of the other stuff, but obviously we'll stick it to the Game of Thrones stuff, right? So I think he had a buddy of his die, and he said his name was John Miller, who was working on a fantasy or a novel called Black Train Coming, even longer than I had been working on The Winds of Winter. It would be great if one of his writer friends finishes it for him. Which to see that is almost like, George, we're starting to go down a bad path here, buddy.
It's also a little interesting because he has been pretty concrete on the fact that he would never want someone to finish his work. So for him to kind of make that comment, it seems a little odd.
It does. And it's also because like George is, of course, getting older. And one of the topics we talk about a lot, Jimmy, you and I have talked about a lot, and we've talked about here on the channel. And I know you've talked about on your channel too, is, if an author dies, is someone going to step in and finish their work, something like that? Obviously, I think the one that comes to mind a lot for people is going to be Wheel of Time. And, Robert Jordan died. Brandon Sanderson, who's obviously done a lot of other great, huge fantasy novels, stepped in, finished his series. Some people say they like Brandon Sanderson's work of Jordan's work better than they like Jordan's.
Yeah, some people felt like he kind of lost the plot there for a second and, ended up Sanderson kind of put it back on track. Also, there's a big difference in writing styles, but who else had stuff, put out after their passing was Tolkien. And a lot of stuff that has been published since his passing, even from, his estate, a lot of people believe that J.R.R. Tolkien would not appreciate. So it's interesting that even with your wishes of not having stuff published, your estate can publish things after, you pass on. But George has always just been seems to be so against that. And for him to even suggest it here is a little interesting. And he gave a direct correlation to Winds of Winter in the sentence. And we don't want to speculate on George's death or anything, obviously. Right. But it is interesting that maybe he's thinking about things a little bit differently now. Yeah,
which is interesting. And I know you have, because for those of you guys who, listen to Ez and I most of the time, Jimmy runs a fantasy, sort of YouTube channel where you're talking about across the spectrum. And I know you have brought up an author several times. You said in the event, obviously, God forbid, that George were to pass away and somebody were to come in. Is it Joe Abercrombie? Is who you feel like?
I always said it would be cool if it was Joe Abercrombie, but I think the most likely one that I've always talked about was Daniel Abraham and Ty Franck, who are James S.A. Corey as a duo for the Expanse series. They worked as assistants under George. And Daniel Abraham and maybe Ty as well live in the same city as George. However, it seems to be that they do not want to finish it. This is new information I have just learned. And that is very disheartening to me because Daniel Abraham, in my opinion, would be a perfect person to kind of carry on the spirit of the work. He had a lot to do with the 5-year gap not being included, actually, in A Song of Ice and Fire. And there's even some speculation, which I think is interesting, that George started to lose a little bit of momentum, or a lot, depending on how you look at it, whenever Daniel Abraham and Ty Franck kind of moved on to their own projects instead of helping him out with A Song of Ice and Fire. So That's very interesting, but I'll be honest, right now, I could not tell you who would finish this because I do not believe Joe Abercrombie would at this point. And in an interview, Daniel Abraham said him and Ty would not. So I don't know who would finish this.
If it does come to that, it is just interesting because this is the first. I know, of course, it just happened to be this scenario, and he himself is not saying, if that happens to me, I hope somebody can finish my work. He does not say that at all, but it is just interesting because, you know, given his age and everything, it's certainly something that we as the fandom have talked about.
Yeah, possibly a change of tune. So
yeah, we'll see. So he goes on to talk about, you know, a lot of stuff, which in his blog he does. He always, you know, he talks about everything. A lot of times he's talking sports, he talks stuff like that. So continuing on, though, we get down and he has a big section about House of the Dragon. Now, this is really interesting. It says, House of the Dragon, glad you asked. I've now watched rough cuts of 9 of the 10 episodes, and I continue to be impressed. I cannot speak to the special effects, many of which are not in yet, but the looks of it, it's great. And the acting, the directing, and the writing are first rate. And yes, for all you book fans, it is my story, which is good, right? You know? He says, sure, there are some changes from Fire and Blood. We could not present 3 alternate versions of every major event, you know, and keep our sanity. But I think that Ryan Condal and his writers made good choices, even some improvements. You know, hearsay, I know, being the author, I'm allowed to tell you. Heresy, excuse me, sorry. Hearsay. I got the Johnny Depp trial in my mind, right? You know, he does not comment on that, though. I mean, of all the things. Though for years, as some of you may recall, I've been saying the TV version of Shay, as portrayed by Sybil Kikili, right? Was a deeper, richer, and more nuanced character than the Shay in my novels. In a similar vein, I am vastly impressed by the show's version of King Viserys, played by Patty Considine, who gives the character a tragic majesty, right? That my book Viserys never quite achieved. Kudos to Patty, Ryan, and his writers, and Miguel and the other directors. You know, there's a lot of great performances in House of the Dragon, and you may never have heard some of our actors, but I think you will learn to love them just as you did the cast of Game of Thrones. So then he'll go on to a bit and go back to Winds of Winter, but I think we'll stop here and talk more about House of the Dragon. So first of all, I love the fact that we're getting 10 episodes because so many other series right now are getting like 6 to 8 episodes. So the fact that we're getting 10 is pretty sweet.
Yes. And I don't think there's any production issues with COVID or anything. Like, they kind of got into that little bit of a sweet spot. And I have a lot of confidence going into this. And I love the fact that George says that this is his story, because one of the big things is all the different, narration or narrators in Fire and Blood. Who are you listening to? You listen to Mushroom, you listen to the Mace, like, who's telling the true story? So hearing that it is George's story, I think we're going to get the truth from all these events. Those things that are a lot more ambiguous in the history text, we're going to find out firsthand.
Yeah. And I talk a lot. I talk a lot about, you know, like what's going on over at Warner Brothers, because I follow them very closely for finance stuff and news. And I'm always,
we're a big stockholder, right?
Yeah, and I'm always talking. Yeah, I'm always talking about, like, here's what's going on at Warner Brothers, because I love DC as well, and so I cover that. But one of the big things that's going on right now, of course, it was just the merger, right, with Discovery Channel and David Zaslav, who's the new CEO. He's the Discovery Channel CEO, sort of acquired Warner Brothers. Today they just basically canned the head of Warner Brothers Movies, like, gone, shifted, you're out of here. Like, they are cleaning house over there. But one of the places that they didn't even touch was HBO, because HBO just does so well in its own thing. However, they are sort of beginning to hire all of these. They want to turn it basically into the way, like, sort of Disney's corporate structure works. Which is like, okay, you have Bob over there. You have Bob Chapek, who's like the CEO. And then you have like all of the different sort of mediums, right? Or and sort of, you know, verticals, right? Which is like you got Star Wars and Marvel and all these things, and they all answer to like one person, and that's how it works. Warner Brothers is definitely a little different. It's kind of like everyone just sort of manages their own thing, and nobody really sort of sits over and sees all of it because it was owned by AT&T. Well, now that's changed. And so they're already saying like, hey, we're going to turn Harry Potter. We want Harry Potter to be like a pillar franchise of it, like Wizarding World. And they haven't said it yet because right now it's sort of just is under the HBO umbrella. But I would not be shocked if we don't hear soon that Westeros is like going to be viewed as a parallel to like DC and Harry Potter, because it certainly seems like it's going in that direction. And so Fire and Blood is going to be that first sort of big test, because I've been saying it. You know, they just, with the launch of HBO Max and everything, House of the Dragon is going to be their big show under the brand sort of new company that they are now. This is going to be their first sort of major crown jewel. And so to hear George come out and say, hey, I love it, is awesome. I mean, not that he would say he didn't like it, but it's still just, it's getting the fire going.
Yeah, and also giving some expectations that things will change. I know there'll at least be one comment on this video that says, if they change a single word, I will be pissed, which is kind of silly. Let's be honest, kind of silly because it's a history book, folks. However, there is some lore stuff that I'm sure they're going to change. I'm fine with that. I'm cool with adaptations, keeping, as long as they can keep the spirit of the work going. I think it's very interesting that King Viserys, or Paddy, you know, who the actor who's playing him, is getting a lot of praise from George because, one, I love Paddy. I thought he was fantastic in The Outsider, which is a Stephen King adaptation, even though the show didn't fulfill all my needs. it kind of stuttered at the end, but I thought Paddy's performance was phenomenal. And King Viserys is so intriguing to me in all of the history. And I actually think he's rather good in Fire and Blood, but there almost feels like there could have been a novella or a novel even from his perspective during all of this. So the fact that we're going to get that performed by such an amazing actor such as Paddy, it's going to be really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, you know, talking about the lore too. You know, the lore of Fire and Blood, which is this is pulling from, is interesting in its own right, because it's not the main series where you have direct narratives coming from a point of view character. You have sort of all of these conflicting pieces of text, which have sort of evolved out of different things. Like initially, it was just stuff that characters were saying in the main series about events that took place in the past. And then George wrote the novellas, right? Like The Princess and the Queen, and, you know, like The Blacks and the Greens, and all of these little things that were just sort of appeared as their own separate piece inside of like weird, you know, writing fantasy magazines that got published. And then those got sort of pulled and chopped up and put into the world of Ice and Fire. And then those got like adapted and pulled and put into Fire and Blood. And so like some of them like are like, some of Fire and Blood is the exact like story pulled from World of Ice and Fire, and some of it is those exact novellas sort of pulled and put into it. Like Aegon's Conquest is like, you know, there's an exact one, which is, you know, so it's so interesting. And then the story, of course, as he's saying, is told to us through several different people, and it's a rough outline. So there's even the like it's not like the main series where you have like Tyrion's trial, right? Like you have line for line, this is exactly the way it goes down in the books. So you can pull that direct dialogue. You don't really have that here. You don't have scenes of characters saying like, this is one person talking to this person. You have a maester telling you this event happened.
Yeah. And also citing all the other different references. And I'm just excited to see how much Mushroom was lying. I mean, that's really what I want to know.
Or Mushroom was right.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's a little bit of both. I think we'll be shocked.
I do too. I do too. So yeah, it's just good to, anytime we're getting more talking about it. So he doesn't say it here, but he goes on He go. It's the last bit, but he has another bit just before here, before he talks about wins, where he says, "I should say a word about my appearances. So I've decided not to attend this year's Worldcon, which is the convention he was going to attend, 2 years ago, where he was going to announce wins was done or lock me up. He had another one of those, right?
No.
So he didn't say anything about this, but he said, I will, instead of Worldcon, it looks as though I will be attending San Diego Comic-Con. Not like, oh, hey, I'm so excited. It says, well, it looks like I'm going to Comic-Con. So now I guess the question would be, Comic-Con is very much unlike something like a Worldcon. Not that I know a whole lot about Worldcon, but I can tell you it's not as big as San Diego Comic-Con, which is like the single biggest, that's the Comic-Con of Comic-Cons. Yeah. That's where Marvel goes and Star Wars goes, and they go show off like huge mega panels about upcoming like big projects. So if George is going to be there, I doubt he says anything about Winds of Winter, but it's just means that we're going to be getting something big about House of the Dragon. It could just be a panel. Maybe they show off a little bit of new footage. I don't think we're going to get another big mega trailer, since we already we got the teaser and then we just got a trailer, but I think we could get another little spot or something. But it seems like they're going to have a big House of the Dragon panel.
Yeah, I think so. I always hope that it's a wins announcement, but I don't think that's likely, unfortunately. But yeah, we'll probably get the final trailer.
Yeah, because San Diego Comic-Con starts July 21st, which is 1 month. I think 1 month exactly, right? Is it the 21st? Yeah. I think so. Yeah, so 1 month exactly before House of the Dragon. So what do we want from this?
I mean, I want the full trailer. Give it to me. Give it all.
Didn't we have a full trailer?
No, I don't think that's considered the full trailer. I think because it was only a minute and a half, or was it 2 minutes?
What? So the very first, so we have two. So the first one, remember, was like a minute, and then the one we just had, I think, was, maybe you're right. Maybe that was still only like 2 minutes.
It is an extended one, but that's not. I do not believe that that's the final trailer. So I think we still have another trailer to go.
Let me see here.
I could be wrong.
Because the one we just had, so the one we got 4 weeks ago was 1 minute and 44 seconds. And then the one we had like 8 months ago, or whenever that was, almost like, I think it was October, right? Of last year or something like that. That one was about 1 minute, and it says 18 seconds, but if you include logo flashes. So maybe you're right. Maybe we do get like a full 2 minute.
I think we do.
That it would probably include a lot of the same footage, my guess is, but it could be bigger.
Yeah, I think it could be full trailer, maybe some more character introductions. I know we're still waiting on a few characters to be cited, though I saw there were some leaks that confirmed some of the characters that were left out. Yeah, so we'll see.
Okay. All right. And so the final bit here, and this is big, and this is what we've been asking for. Wins, you say? Yes, still working. Finally finished a clutch, which I think is important because, right, it would be a clutch of dragon eggs, right? So that's fresh in his mind, right?
I like it.
A clutch of Cersei chapters that were giving me fits. Now I'm wrestling with Jaime and Brienne. The work proceeds, though not as fast as many of you would like. That is all for now. So he here is saying something that is great. Not because a lot of the updates are just, I've been writing, I'm writing chapters, whatever. Here he just flat out said, I just finished not one, but clearly multiple Cersei chapters.
Is there an official number with clutch?
I think so, because
clutch. I want to see how many. 12. Chicken clutch contains approximately 12 eggs.
So here we go. So so chicken, it says a duck may lay 7 to 14. So
it's a lot.
It's a lot. Which to me means he's probably done with Cersei.
Yeah, because I do know that he doesn't always go chronologically through the book. Sometimes he will just do a POV, like total, or a couple POVs at a time. Because I thought this was interesting. Because like Cersei clearly is going to have a lot to do, in my opinion, at the end of Winds of Winter, whether it be blowing up the Sept Baelor. If that happens in the books, we have no idea. But I think it's really interesting that he says now he's with Jaime and Brienne, and the word wrestling is used. And I feel like that was intentional because that's the kind of person George is. So wrestling with Jaime and Brienne, maybe they're fighting because she has to come get him. Like, is this
right?
Is this maybe one of the final arcs that we'll see? Because we know Arya has already been written over a couple times. I think he had multiple Arya chapters that he's talked about.
Right.
So are Jaime and Brienne some of the last ones? Who knows?
Maybe. You know, it's incredible. This is what George does, because this is what he does in his normal writing, right? it's so interesting on so many levels, because why was like Cersei giving him fits makes a lot of sense, as you said, because she is at the end of the book. If we use the show as any sort of indication, right? Like, if Winds of Winter were to end, where in the show it's Winds of Winter, in theory, I think the episode isn't the episode Winds of Winter, the season 6 episode 10, where Cersei blows up the Sept of Baelor and Jon Snow is proclaimed king in the north.
Yes, and I believe
Bran has the vision of the Tower of Joy and the sword, and Dawn is laid above the thing, and
Daenerys is coming across.
Right.
Yeah.
So if that is sort of the case, does that see him saying Cersei's giving me trouble is huge, because I don't actually think until you get to the end, Cersei's arc, if it goes anything like it did in the books, doesn't actually seem like it's to be that difficult, because in the show, because where we leave her is she goes back and after she does the walk of shame. Okay, here is Robert Strong, right?
Yes. Yes.
Here's okay. So to me, it's going to be planning, dealing with that internal struggle, trying to convince Tom, and unless the faith is going to be way more involved. And then maybe maybe she does blow up the Sept of Baelor, and you're like, who do I really have to kill off here? And how is that going to impact the story going forward?
And even if it's not the Sept of Baelor and it's something else, because that's like totally possible.
Different.
George has always said that he has trouble killing off his characters. Surprising, but he says, it actually bothers him because he spends so many years with these characters and whatnot. So, like, to me, that's a little bit of a signposting that it's something detrimental or very tough to write. Possibly Tommen dying or something like that, right? So I feel like these are things that would happen in the climax of the book. And him getting past that barricade is really good news, because if this was the hard part and he finally swallowed the frog and did it, maybe these other chapters will kind of roll, depending on what he needs to do. One thing I've always wondered, has he ever talked about the fact that he's worked on any Daenerys chapters and wins yet in any of these updates?
Oh, the big one was the one in
and we talked about writing hundreds of pages.
The big one, there was the big one in 2020, where he broke it down, and then let me see if I can find it. But Brendan Beefish, who's sort of like the guy who runs the Reddit, and he runs the no, I've never talked, no, I don't know him or anything, but he's the one who runs Not a Pod.
Yes,
it's just a Game of Thrones podcast. He did a big Reddit post around that time, and he broke down every chapter that George has ever mentioned, like in terms of when and where, the sample chapters and everything. And I don't think Daenerys has ever been mentioned.
See, that's my problem, because I don't think that Daenerys is not going to be in Winds of Winter. I think that she has to be in Winds of Winter. So I'm very curious to see if that is the case, because I think that those might end up taking him some time. So, Daenerys. Okay, now we got Jaime and Brienne, and is there going to be more Bran chapters? It's interesting.
Let me go back here, because April 29th, I did an update about this. This was the update where he said Winds is going to be a big book. The way it's going, it could be bigger than A Storm of Swords or A Dance with Dragons, the longest book in the series. I do usually cut and trim once I finish, but I need to finish first. which was, remember that we talked about that, and we did one of our Patreon hangouts, and we were talking about the fact that, man, it feels like for him to even sort of be talking about the end of the book instead of the woe is me, like I'm never gonna finish. Now he just said, I was really struggling with Cersei chapters, and now I have those finished.
Yeah, this book is going to be chaos, bro. So like I just recently
I'm also thinking he's actually really close to being done.
I think that he is certainly in the home stretch because he's mentioning trimming down. He's finishing up Cersei chapters. So every POV that's been confirmed so far, by the way, there is no mention of Daenerys. So I would say, based on what I'm looking at, he certainly has to, if we just assume every other POV is finished, he would still need to write Brienne, Jaime, Bran. I don't think has a chapter here, does he? No.
Let me see if I can find it.
So you got Bran, Jaime, Brienne, and Daenerys. So those are 4 POVs that I think would be in this book. Here's the thing, Matt. This is crazy because I just read Feast and then I read Dance recently on like my millionth reread. Think how many POVs this book is going to have. It's like 20 POVs. Like we are going to get such a ridiculous book, and I almost don't see how it couldn't be paced. Like you have so many options to keep the book moving. Like I think the pace of this novel is going to be insane.
It is. This book is gonna be huge. I'm gonna do a search here really quick because I save a lot of things.
Oh, there's also gonna be a Melisandre chapter.
Yes, on my Reddit. Let me see. Hopefully Matt in the past did not screw me over, and I actually saved that thing.
We're also going to get Melisandre's backstory for her time in Ashai, so that's going to be sick. And Bran Stark is confirmed to be in the book, but he has not announced that he was ever working on any of those chapters. So there's still some work to go, for sure. But good news. Absolutely good news.
Every Wind of Winter. Let me just type that in, see if I can. Maybe. I don't know. I'll keep searching. But over on his blog, just to see some of the other things he said, because he had another one where he was saying like, and I have finished some more Winds of Winter chapters. And so now that's interesting because that to me means those were probably Cersei chapters.
Yes.
That he was working on.
Maybe. Hard to say, right? He could have been wrapping up some other ones. Maybe he's keeping something under his hat. His little conductor hat.
Let me see. Yeah, here he was talking about the Rise of the Dragon book. Let me see. But Westeros has to become bigger than Winds of Winter. In addition to Winds, I also need to deliver the second volume, Archmaester Godain's History, Fire and Blood. Okay, so he had that. So I mean, he is moving along, but I do remember it's not, I don't find it, but it was certainly at the beginning of this year. I think he did an update where he said, I just finished another big batch of chapters.
Yes.
So to me, I think that was probably Cersei because actually the last one he said was Arya. Remember?
Yeah, Arya and Barristan.
He said, yeah, now off to Arya and Barristan. So it sounds like he's moving along now. Now it sounds like the pace has been picked up.
It sounds like he finished a bunch of Arya and Barristan chapters and then finished these Cersei chapters. So, I mean, I guess what we're trying to say, people, is that he is working on this thing. And maybe, just maybe, he's starting to realize that he's got to get it done.
Right. Maybe unfortunately the death of his friend who couldn't finish his book will cause him to be like, I need to buckle down.
I mean, he has had a lot of loss in the last few years.
Yes.
When you see his blog, I mean, it's honestly, it's sad, especially when you go on Twitter and you see the replies and he's sharing memories of dead fellow friends and people are just like, where's the book, George? And it's like, he's a human being, folks. And there's a lot of other really good fantasy books out there. If you want to check them out, you can look at my channel and see which books they are, like A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yes. Yes.
We can occupy your time. I think this is really good news. And this is the state that we're in where we're reading a 4 sentence paragraph, and we're like, this is good. This is the biggest news we've had in a long time.
It is. Well, it's just so interesting. Not only it's exciting because he's actually saying like, hey, I finished chapters, which is all we've been asking for, or we've just been like, I feel like people would hound him less if he were to just like to do this, where he's like, hey, I'm writing this character, or
Yes.
I'm doing this, only because it's been over 10 years. So like, for me, I'd much rather you be like, I'm still struggling with a Cersei chapter than be like, Winds is taking a long time, or like,
get over it.
Get over it, or it's like, dude, that's all we want is just like hey, right now I'm working on a Cersei chapter. So, okay, cool, because that changes the perspective of woe is me, I can't finish this book in time, and like fans are upset that I haven't finished it, to okay, well, what do you think he's writing about, like with Cersei?
There's a little buzz.
Total different mindsets. One is like, now I'm upset and frustrated and annoyed. The other one is I'm intrigued and really want to read your awesome book you're writing. Like total different mindsets.
Yeah, and I remember back in I think it was right in the kind of the middle of everything in 2020, he was saying that, I finished hundreds of pages this year, still have hundreds more to go. And a lot of people are like, man, I'm like, no, that's good news, because I'm not convinced he didn't start writing.
Yeah, because right now the Song of Ice and Fire Reddit is exploding, and it's nothing but people saying like, what do you think these Cersei chapters involve? Like total different
vibes, man.
Totally different vibes. Because now I am curious, what do you think these Cersei chapters involve? Right. So like, it's like, for context, people are saying he finished these Cersei chapters that gave him trouble, and now everyone's like diving in. My intuition says that it's the chapters before young Griff's arrival that will probably be the toughest to write. It feels a little Marine naughty, right?
Yeah.
With all the mysterious competing factions and the Faith, the Tyrells, and the looming enemy. I'm guessing it's dealing with Kevin's death, her trial, young Griff sieging King's Landing, her flight from King's Landing back to Casterly Rock, perhaps.
That's always been my crackpot theory. I always said she would end up at the Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine the trial is very difficult to write, because as a writer, you don't want to do the same thing again. And he just wrote I shouldn't say just wrote, he wrote it about 20 years ago, but the trial for Tyrion, doing that again, another Lannister trial, you don't want to make it the exact same. And obviously the Faith are involved, so it's not. But I could see that giving him a lot of trouble, just trying to make sure that it's different.
Yeah. Let me. I'm still trying to find that thing. I'll have to find it at some point. But it was this huge breakdown of like every chapter that's ever been announced. Because some of it includes stuff where George said I had to cut a few like brand chapters short from that were supposed to be in A Dance of Dragon, and we know are getting moved to Winds of Winter. So we know we're getting like a handful of brand chapters in Winds of Winter that should have been over. We know we're getting Melisandre. We're probably, I still think the opportunity for any of those chapters that are the sample chapters to be changed exist. Definitely. Like a lot of people view those as like direct canon. I don't know that you can actually. Ez and I both are still on the fence that I wouldn't say you should consider that like hardcore direct canon.
It's been too long.
It's been too long. He could change them. He could have had to completely erase them. I don't think that's the case. More than likely, those are exactly what's going to be in the book, just because, it's like, I don't want to go back and fix it. But just for the sake of argument, you do have to consider it potential. So you have, I think that's around there's around 10 chapters or something there. And then we know there's a lot of it seems like this book is going to be Arya, Cersei, and Jaime heavy.
What I don't
very Cersei heavy is what it seems like.
What I don't want from this, please don't do this to us, publisher. Please do not split this book. Because like this happened recently with Tab Williams. He was writing the third book in his Last King of Ostenar trilogy, and he wrote a chunker because that's what he does, and they split it. They said we can't publish it, we got to split it. So now like there's like a year break, it just becomes messy, and it's like if Winds were to get split, that would be very annoying.
I don't know. See, I've thought about I like before this year, where he's actually started sounding like way more confident about the end of the book. I had been on the fence saying I think he should split it, just because it's like at least then you've got something published and people will totally back off.
Yeah.
But now it sounds like it's all these posts. It sounds way more like he is in the home stretch. Yeah. So March 9th, he said, yes, of course, I'm still working on Winds of Winter. I have stated 100 times in 100 venues, that I'm working on it. He said, I made a lot of progress in Winds in 2020, less in 2021, but less is not none. And now he's sort of talking about the end, and he's talking about like, I just finished normally the tone is like, I'm struggling. Now the tone was, I just got past a struggle. So
yeah. Yeah. And who knows, maybe this is one he had to keep coming back to and was holding him up the entire time. By the way, I'd be cool with a creative split. Like if he wanted to split it himself. It's if the publisher forces it. Right. I would be very upset with that.
Like it's because that's what Feast and Dance were essentially, is it was going to be one book and it was too big.
It happens a lot to authors. And just give us a 1,400 page book. Like I don't care. Like just give it to me. It's been too long.
Well, I mean, from a publishing standpoint, actually, I don't know though anymore, because like, I guess one, it's a retail space and it's all this stuff, but so many people read Kindle and audiobooks now. Like if you're the publisher, it's like you just sit back and collect checks. I mean,
it'll be one of the biggest book releases in the last decade, easily.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be massive. So
yeah. So okay. So I guess maybe just a little more theorizing, and then we can call it. So like, what I mean. Do you think he's done with Cersei, or do you think he had to get past like maybe there was in the Cersei chapters, there was something he had to fix in order to like then go finish Jaime Brienne?
Well, Jaime Brienne obviously is going to be linked to it, even if it's just thematically, right? And what he's thinking, what she's all this stuff. I tend to think that it's likely that he's done with her if a clutch truly means 7 to 14 chapters, because there's only so much space in the book.
Right.
And George isn't the most brief with chapters. 10 to 15 is somewhat normal, but I've seen him write 50-page chapters. So I think that he would be done with it. Also, I don't think he would go on Not a Blog and be like, I'm done writing all of Cersei. Like that just doesn't seem like an update.
That does not seem like something he would do, because he always wants to give himself, because he calls himself a gardener. Yeah. So it's like in the event he needs to come back and write another Cersei chapter, I don't think he's going to be done, but I think he's done. I think he's done with Cersei.
Yeah. And I think that
he might be done. Sorry. He might be done with Arya, because he didn't say because there was an update a few ago where it's like, I need to go write an Arya chapter. He didn't say like, oh, now I need to go back to Arya.
That's true. And wasn't it like off to dance with the death or something? It was something like that, like exactly what he to murder someone or something crazy like that.
Exactly.
So he clearly had in mind what that chapter was, and it sounds like he got through it. So I'm optimistic, man. But I was also optimistic. Everyone flipped out at the one that he had where he kind of was just like, it's not happening fast enough. I care about other stuff. Everyone was super mad at him, but I still kind of took it positively. Maybe it's just because I'm I'm coping. Maybe that's it. Right. Maybe I'm on copium, but I don't think so.
Yeah. And then I guess I just think Jaime and Brienne, like their arc.
Lady Stoneheart's going to be involved.
It's gonna be so different. It's gonna be so different than the show. Because in the show, Jaime just goes to the Riverlands and kind of wanders around and then goes back to Cersei and then goes north.
Well, yeah, the Lady Stoneheart's at the center of this.
Exactly.
Because also he kind of spoiler George, like Brienne at the end, like we think she might have got hung, right, in Feast, and then you're telling us she's in the book, bro. I mean, come on.
And he's clearly writing Jaime and Brienne chapters together, which means they link back up.
Yeah, man, I want to read that so bad.
Dude. So do we think he's writing the Jaime Brienne stuff again, maybe towards the end of the book?
It'll be interesting because there are going to be some.
Why would you go back? Why would you go back and write like a chapter that's going to be in the middle or something like that?
Well, he does do that. So he'll write from a perspective and be in a completely different part of the novel. Like I guess
that's true.
It's how he works, right? But I do think that some of these plot lines are going to be pushed to the second half of the book because you're not going to open. Let's say there's roughly 12 POVs. He's not going to open up with 12 different POVs in this book. It's not happening.
No.
He's going to start with. If I had to guess, he'll probably start with Danny or Barristan or something, and then I really think Bran also is probably going to get some early shine because they're leftover chapters, right, from Dance.
Yeah, you know, the one obviously hasn't said anything about Jon Snow, which I think is fine because, you know,
he's dead.
You can't say Jon Snow. But how do we think this book is ending?
This book is ending with Jon Snow's resurrection through warging, and him.
You think that's going to be like the final?
I think that's the final thing. Yeah,
like an epilogue, or you think it's the final chapter?
You know, it could be the final chapter, but now that I'm thinking about that, now that I've said that out loud, I feel like that can't be the case, right? Because too much time would have passed.
Right. Because the crazy thing is, and again, the ending, like in the show, might be so totally different that we need to just wipe, like, not only season 8 from our minds, but season 7, like, from our minds. Like, we might need to wipe
7 and 8. Yeah.
I don't know about 6. 6 feels like all very logical.
So you think the Sept of Baelor
progressions?
You think that happens?
I think it could. I definitely do. 7 and 8. Like 6 feels so logical to be the next step in everything. Like a Battle of the Bastards makes sense. You have to get there differently. Cersei blowing up the Sept of Baelor. We already know about all the wildfire. It would eliminate a lot of her enemies. You could kill young Griff in the process.
So I do believe. Well, I think Griff's staying alive, but I do believe that the Sept of Baelor could be the catalyst for Cersei losing power in King's Landing to Griff, who seems like a white knight at the time, which is where they fly his banners. Dany lands, he's being praised, he's the Mummer's dragon, and then we have a dance of dragons. I think all that is very logical.
So maybe, and maybe that's why it was taking him so hard to write, because if Cersei's at the center of everything,
she's got to get out because she's not dying.
She does have to get out. Another key component is Tommen and Myrcella, because Ez and I have talked about the possibility that it's flipped, because Tommen just feels like so young to kill off, and Myrcella feels like way more important, and she's like still alive and totally tied to Dorne. Like maybe.
Oh my goodness. What if Myrcella gets married to young Griff?
I know, I was just about to say that. Like,
but how would the Martells let that happen? I mean, none of their plans ever work.
Because who are they going to marry? Who are they going to marry off?
Ariana.
Yeah, but to who? I mean, they tried to go get. Yeah, I know.
Because in the books, he actually kind of tells her, I think, that was the plan, right?
I know, but I guess my thought about Dorne is, like, because Quentin dies, Quentin goes over to marry Daenerys and dies. You know, in the show, again, this is the show, Daenerys comes over, and like one of her first allies is Dorne. So maybe young Griff, because I think the possibility of I don't know. I like the idea of Myrcella. Maybe she's proposed as a marriage alliance, and then that causes Dorne to think, hey, we need to come up with a different strategy. And then that's where they start maybe trying to figure something else out.
Yeah.
Because the key to possibly young Griff is Sansa. Is Sansa going to marry young Griff because of the whole turn?
I don't think Baelish gives her up, man.
Well, I think she's gonna see Baelish's arc in the show is so wrong that there's just no way. Sansa's clearly going to be the death of him, and I think she could totally just expose him because his arc is so hard to place down, because he hasn't married her to Ramsay.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. George already sort of did that arc.
Yeah.
So that leaves her totally open, totally different. So maybe what happens is it's Dorne and Baelish being like, "Hey, we'll marry you to young Griff," and they're sort of deciding. And then maybe Cersei's trying to marry him to, I don't know, maybe she views Marcella as an option.
I mean, as we talk through this, you can see how difficult this is.
Exactly. We can always
like George, I do feel from a bit, because like he has a lot of options, but he needs to make the right pick.
Right.
And there's a lot more variables in the books.
I think he has. I think he's already made his pick.
Oh, he's made his decision.
I think the pick is in. We're just waiting.
The pick is in.
The pick is in, man. I think the pick is in, and I think so if Cersei does blow the Sept of Baelor and young Griff is standing there, maybe there's your catalyst, because why would he need to ally with Dorne if Cersei blows the whole thing up and like the townsfolk and like everybody in King's Landing revolts, and then he's already got power? He would no longer need Dorne. He could choose what he wanted. What if Cersei kills? What if Tommen is like, whether he kills himself or he is accidentally killed, say, in the Sept of Baelor, and when Marcella comes back, she realizes like, my mom's batshit crazy, and she killed Tommen, and so she's like disowns her, which then makes her the young and more beautiful queen, and then she could get with Griff, and then Cersei's really on her own back in Casterly Rock.
Yeah, and then you got to figure out how to get her there. Robert Strong.
Well, that would be the chapters. But then the only problem with Cersei having to retreat to Casterly Rock is, and this could be the show tainting us and the books too a little bit, and I think, like, does Cersei make it to the end game? Yes or no?
So I think that the prophecy has to come true in the books. It means way too much in the books. So I think Jaime or Tyrion are gonna kill her. So this is just my theory.
Right.
I've always thought she would go back to the Rock, and I believe that Tyrion would burn the Rock, because all the way back into Game of Thrones, he's saying how he's had dragon dreams of burning his family alive, burning Casterly Rock. Even, I think, mentions it again in Dance, where he says he wants to burn the Rock, especially whenever he doesn't get, when he asks for Casterly Rock and he'll never get it, right? So I think that Tyrion will likely kill Cersei at Casterly Rock with dragons. Whether or not he's riding them, that's a different thing.
Do you think George specifically chose the word clutch to indicate that somehow it involves dragons with Cersei?
Oh my God. Well, maybe it's just,
I wouldn't put it past him.
Maybe it's just the dragon though. Oh my God.
Right.
Okay. So two things. It could just be the dragon, young Griff, right? He's a Targaryen.
Or dragons, plural.
Or dragon pit, which has wildfire underneath it.
Oh.
Because there's wildfire under the dragon pit. That's what the sorcerers tell Tyrion. See, this is where I'm like, am I going to tinfoil? Am I?
No, I don't think there is. Because I feel like we finally just have, like he said, he's like, this is the first update where he's specifically talking about chapters that actually gives us like a slight indication to something that's actually going to happen. Because all the other chapters they ever told, like, we know Arya's over in Braavos. She's going to have to come back. Like,
yeah,
show or not, Arya, like, you don't send Arya over to Braavos to train to become a badass, deadly assassin to just have her stay over there. Like, it's obvious that she's coming back.
Yeah.
Cersei's plot right now, like, take the show out of your mind, is not entirely obvious. There's a ton of variables that could happen.
Yeah, and she's unhinged. I mean, she's making terrible decisions. All that decision making is gonna bite her. Like, I think in the books, it feels very obvious that she would lose power at this point.
Right.
Like, I think she has to lose power. unless if she's gonna do like rule through martial law, but like I don't think she has the command to do that at this point. It's hard to say.
Let me look here. So Cersei has 2 chapters in A Dance with Dragons, and she has 9 chapters in A Feast for Crows. She appears obviously in a bunch of chapters, but she doesn't have POV chapters. And so she has a total of 12 chapters, which means if she gets anywhere from 7 to 12, which is a clutch as we looked up, my guess is that Winds, which he says is going to be his biggest book, as big as a Storm of Swords. Storm of Swords is really 83 chapters. If you include the prologue and the epilogue, although I feel like Dance is actually a higher word count, because I feel like the chapters in Dance are like enormous. I could be wrong on that, but I feel like if you look at the books side by side, I feel like Dance is probably bigger, just in terms of actual like word count, but I could be wrong. Either way, that's 73 really if you count the prologue and epilogue. So I mean, Cersei's clearly going to be an enormous part of the book. I mean, because pretty much anybody who gets over 7 chapters, I mean, that's 10%. That's 10%.
Yeah, it's going to be a massive
Cersei
book,
if not more.
Which makes you wonder, maybe this is it for her. That'd be, that'd be wild. Be wild. I still think Jaime and Cersei are going to come back together, though. Like in the books, it makes sense. And again, the Valonqar prophecy is definitely in play.
Right.
It's going to happen. Just how it's going to happen is going to be a big question mark. I do see her falling from grace, though. Like,
right.
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say.
And then he immediately goes to Jaime and Brienne and them and wrestling, like with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Things that are happening with Cersei will play directly into what he's going to do with Jaime, like for sure. Their chapters have always also kind of been parallel for the most part. He's always thinking about her. She randomly thinks, how big of an idiot he is. So it'll be interesting to see where Jaime ends up at the end of this book as well.
Yeah. Interesting. So much. So good. It's like I have to take a step back and really process all of this new information. But it's cool. So this is a great update from George, because this is what we want. We want to be like theorizing and really deep diving into like, okay, what exactly does this mean? So
I mean, those chapters are pinned. Like they're done.
They're done.
He has completed chapters for
Cersei. I think Cersei's done. Like, I think he has completely written her story. And the fact that he said in the last update, like talking about like, when I finished the book and it felt like he's getting closer. Now he's flat out, seems like he's saying, I have a character, one of the key pillars probably of this story done. I think we're way closer. I'm thinking 2023.
No.
I'm thinking 20. I'm starting to really feel it now. I think 2023.
I've been saying it for years. I always said 2024. November 2024.
Not that we get it, because he's broken that down before too. I think he says like from the time I say it's finished, like the absolute earliest you would get it is 6 months.
Yeah.
He's like absolute early. So you're really looking more at like 9 months. Edit, proofread, all that stuff,
Covers,
then
press tour,
give it to the thing. They got to set up retail space and,
oh my God,
all that stuff. But I feel like I'm really starting to think 2023, he's going to say it's done. The only thing that's going to slow it down is it sucks. House of the Dragon, because I'm so excited for it. But yeah, now if he has to start doing all these press tours for House of the Dragon,
I don't know if he will. I'm very curious to see how much he actually takes on.
It felt like he didn't want to go to Comic-Con.
He's getting a little older.
Well, he said apparently I'm going to Comic-Con, not like can't wait to see you guys at Comic-Con. See, the message is, totally different.
The man wants to stay home and write, I think.
Let him.
I hope.
Let him. Interesting. Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks so much, man, for coming on and talk about this stuff, because I just love anytime we get any sort of breaking news, from George, because it's just so much fun, because this is what we want. We want to be speculating about it. And now this, I don't know, forever changes any wins of winner theory I'm going to have going forward that involves Cersei, because now I feel like her story's done.
Yeah, it just feels like there's a lot more in play now, like knowing that there's a clutch of chapters, and we can start talking about the numbers of those compared to everything that we've already had confirmed. I'm going to do some math. I'm going to break it down once I see all the POV chapters, and it just, I don't know. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe?
Yeah, I think so, man. I think so.
And we won't even mention a dream for spring. So,
oh no,
we'll just leave that.
That's down the line. Awesome. Well, anyway, hey Jimmy, where can people find you on the internet, man?
Yeah, check me out on YouTube, the Fantasy Network, if you're looking for books to check out in the fantasy and sci-fi genre. I'm always finding the next best reads over there, and I also read a lot of the older stuff too. There are books that I like almost as much as A Song of Ice and Fire, and that was my whole quest on the channel, is to find the next best read, and we're doing well over there. We have a bookish podcast as well. I've done some Game of Thrones / Song of Ice and Fire content as well, and I will definitely be reviewing House of the Dragon episodes this coming fall, which will be a lot of fun, and the Rings of Power show as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna be going live, obviously, like every Sunday, except for the Sunday that I'm getting married, because Ez will be at the wedding. Hopefully Jimmy attends the wedding. He is invited, so just put him on the spot here. So, and I believe you RSVP'd, so
I think I got this. I got to save the date. I don't think I got the invitation yet.
Oh, it's on the website that I need to send him. Dang it. Well, I have it. So I will give that. I will give that to you. Nonetheless, you might be getting a live the day of my wedding, which is on Sunday. Quick update of what we thought of House of the Dragon, from my wedding, right? What's better than a Westeros wedding? Right? Nothing bad happens.
Oh my.
So anywho, awesome. Anyway, all right. Thanks, Jimmy, as always, for coming on. Thank you guys, as always, for watching and for listening. We will see you next time. And remember that Winds of Winter apparently is coming.